Good morning. How are you doing, baby?
Doing good.
Excited for today.
I'm
Just
not
on a,
excited. I'm actually a bit nervous, and I don't necessarily want to have this conversation, but
okay. Well, that is, I think, I think I'm nervous too. And I think it's also important that we highlight why we're having this conversation. And I've been thinking about this for a couple days now. And obviously, everyone who's been following us and knows our journey realizes in 2021 there was a lot of disconnection between us. And it was mainly because we were looking externally and we weren't really focusing on ourselves. We didn't know who
I
we
mean,
were.
well, the disconnection was the entire relationship. We became aware of it in 2021, is what I
Yeah.
would say.
Okay. So we became aware of it in 2021. And so we made this choice that we were going to silence the radio noise, and we were going to look internally to ourselves, and we were going to lean into our relationship and to the kids. And I'm
And
bringing
ourselves.
and ourselves, yes. And I'm bringing this forward because a couple days ago we recorded our podcast for our 1 year anniversary in the RV life, and we were talking about the journey. And this all came, a lot of the messaging for me, and I believe for you as well, you can speak on this, is that it's time for us to start turning to our purpose in life. Um, and that's what we've really learned from the RV is that. And I was telling you yesterday that, you know, many people have engaged in the short time that podcast has been out and have asked a lot of questions. And for myself, I want to be authentic and go back to why we started this uh, journey together with regards to Jasil and Alex and the RVing. And a conscious relationship is having a hard conversation. And what better way to have this hard conversation in the public format, which we've had this conversation behind closed doors, but having this conversation again in the public format and talking uh, about what we're experiencing and also giving permission for people that may hold are holding back.
Yeah, I felt like my sweater was choking me, but I think it's just my throat constricting.
Yeah, it's funny is like I meditated this morning. I got in the cold shower. I was doing my morning routine, and I'm a little on edge.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna rip the band-aid off because that's the way I like to do things. So a year ago, well, a little bit over a year ago, the one of the main reasons we decided to RV was, like Alex stated, was we realized how disconnected we were, and I realized how unhappy I was with myself. And where the past we're coming up on 11 years together, 10 years married now. In the past, I have always blamed Alex for that, and not necessarily like directly him, but like life, like, oh, it's because I have kids and I don't get to do what I want, it's because he's working all the time, it's because he doesn't help me. Like everything around me was the reasoning for my unhappiness. And throughout the last 5 years, especially, of me becoming more aware of what really happens is like we are just projecting, and everyone else is just mirrors for what's really going on internally with ourselves. So in the past 2 years, I really been sitting with that of how can I make myself happy instead of blaming others for being unhappy or being where I am. And that came to me, the way I chose at the time to want to fix that was to ask Alex for separation. So I moved out of our bedroom. Our kids at the time were sleeping in our master bedroom, had a huge closet, extra space. So I moved all my stuff into there, and we went through a separation trial. And I told them the focus of that. What the it just said recording stopped and recording in progress. I don't know what just happened.
Um, so the last thing I heard, and I don't know if the camera picked it up, and I'm not editing this out because I think Zoom was scared for us too. I don't know. I'm being funny there. Was that you moved into the master bedroom, you were talking about that process.
Okay, so yeah, so I moved into the master bedroom where the kids were staying, and it was a really big room with a lot of closet space. And Alex stayed in our bedroom. And within a few weeks, Alex began to really dive into his inner work. And we began having conversations that for the past 10 years, we've never been able to have without arguing, without blame, without, putting the responsibility on the other person. And within a few weeks, it really shifted things in the relationship. And we decided to end the trial of separation and come back together. And shortly after that is where we made the decision to move out of the house and live in an RV so we can, in a sense, tune down everything that was going on outside of the relationship and really just focus on the relationship and the family. And we've done that now for the past at least 10 months or, a year that we made that intentional shift. And now, I started reaching a point again where I'm unhappy again because I'm not doing what I want to be doing. And, I brought it up again that I'm reaching a point where I want to be alone. I don't want to be in a relationship. And a big part of that is I don't want to be limited or told or, what to do and how to do it. And yes, I have a family and I have 4 kids, and I understand the responsibility as a parent to that. And I guess where my reasoning comes with that is at some point during the summer, we made an agreement that I would move forward in what I want to do with my life. And that way I could dedicate time away from the kids to focus on those endeavors. And there was basically a sprinkle of time here and there. And then weeks would go by where nothing would happen. Then again, a little sprinkle of time here and there. And I, at the time, was really focused and ready to drive into my mission and my purpose and the things I want to do. And without having consistent working hours, I kind of given up hope on that vision. And recently, Alex has had to return to Virginia. I'm in New York City right now, staying with my parents, and he's in Virginia because there is a restaurant we own there that he's closing out that chapter for us. And with this space and me like resuming the role of full-time mom again, a lot of, past thoughts and traumas and resentments have been arising for me, and they were leading up to that point of why is it that when something like the restaurant needs time, someone can go away and work that fully, but when I ask time for myself on working on my things that I want to do, there is no time. The time isn't made, it doesn't get created. And some people are like, well, just make it, like sit down and get on a schedule and do that. And what I've seen from the past is like anytime we've had those conversations, the schedule never happens, or there's always something bigger. And I just reached a point where I was like, you know what? Like, I'm tired of you not being ready for me to do what I want to do. Like, I am ready for me to do what I want to do. And if that means that we need to get separated so I can live my life and, you do whatever it is that you need to figure out, then so be it. Because once again, I'm just at a point in my life that I'm not willing to wait for anyone to do what I really want to do.
Yeah, and I really truly appreciate your authenticity in the moment, and I thought that was going to be worse than really what it was. Like I had this thought that like, oh man, it's going to go somewhere. So I had a few things raised up for me, and I want to just hit a couple points. And I had sent Jasil this long 5.5 minute message, and it was really from the heart, a lot of passion yesterday, and coming to a realization for a lot of things. And when we started this journey, I was choosing myself. And when I was choosing myself, I started to see our relationship, and she was choosing herself. Like we were doing our things, we were seeing our relationship flourish. We were getting deeper. We were having these different conversations. We were holding space for each other. We were healing together. We were having really good sex. We were having sex more. The kids. The relationship with the kids was better, challenging but better. Right, like everything was elevated in our life. It was going in the direction that we wanted to. And what I realized is, and this thought had come around to me yesterday, is that when things are going well, you can't take your foot off the pedal. And what I mean by that is, like, I was starting to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I was starting to enjoy doing that work and seeing the relationship with you get better, and feeling more alive than I ever have. And I'm like, why do I want to stop this? Like, why do I want to not spend more time with you? Why don't I not want to choose you and the kids over my purpose? And I've come to realize that, and doing a little bit of research on your gene key, which isn't mine, and I'm sure you'll talk a little bit about it either here in the future, of like building the baby steps, right? Taking those steps, building momentum, and then obviously, like for me, maintaining that momentum. And I just stopped doing like my spiritual practices and self-love practices and things that were making me get to that point. I stopped doing. And when I stopped doing that, I also realized, and I say this often, is our energy is contagious, and my energy was starting to be affected because I wasn't taking care of myself, and when that was happening, I was coming on edge. I had some resentment started coming up, anger coming up, and I started to pull in. I started to retract in prior to making all those strides. Like when we were in our relationship before the separation, I would always stay inward, and I started to pull back in. And I wasn't conscious of all this until recently, but part of that pulling in was my resentment, anger was making me play small. I was staying in my comfort zone. I was not stepping out and pushing myself to where I was and where I wanted to be. And in turn, I was holding Jasil back. I was subconsciously holding Jasil back because I was afraid to step in and because that's what I wanted to do.
And how
Right.
do you hold me back by holding yourself back?
Well, I
Like, how
mean,
do you see that?
so I think, like, so for instance, like once again, it goes back to the concept energy is contagious. Like our auras, or like my energy, I wasn't on a firm, grounded, present energy since probably August, end of August, after I got back from the
I'm
uncivilized.
saying, like, essentially you can't control what I do, right? So like, how in your head is it that you're holding me back because you're not, in charge of my energy and of me and what I do? So how
Well,
would you say that?
just like I think what really put us in a lot of momentum moving forward was that I stepped into my masculinity. I started being direct. I started being assertive. I started leading in the relationship. And what was happening, what I realized happened, was that I reverted to the nice guy. I was more looking to you, to things, daily operations, and things that I had been doing for 5 to 6 months, and realized that I was leaning heavily on you, and therefore it was knocking you out of what your alignment, or I say alignment, but your energy. I mean, you can speak on that, but I just think that I wasn't providing the assistance that I needed to provide, for myself and for our relationship to flourish and our kids.
I know, but I'm saying, give me a physical example, because right now everything you're talking about is like energetics. What is the actual, like, daily example of how you would hold someone back?
I mean, like, so for instance, I oftentimes, there's a few examples coming up, so I'll use one. Is like when I did give you time in the last few months, and I had the kids. If you were in the RV and I was in we were at a campground, and they gave me a lot of resistance of like, hey, I want to go back, or I want to do this. I would come back sooner. Another thought is, um, you know, I wanted to, in my head, I had articulated with myself to say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna schedule her a 7-day stay at a hotel, let her go do her thing. I got the kids. And I just, I got scared. I got scared of stepping into um that position of fatherhood, right? And that where I take that back to is that I wasn't doing the practices that I needed to confront my challenges around fatherhood,
Do you want
around
to talk about that?
we can
Because
we
I mean, that kind of came up for us a few months ago, and we had that conversation. I don't know if you recall, you were on the couch, and I had said something, and it was basically the same thing because we this was around August. We were already starting to have these conversations that I wasn't having the time that I wanted, and you whenever we try to have the conversation like, hey, let's make a schedule, it just never got done.
yeah.
Like there was like this extreme resistance of like, hey, let's do this, and then it just did not happen. And anytime I'm like, hey, what do you think about me taking, a few hours this day, it was always like, yeah, yeah, okay. But then the day would come and it just wouldn't happen. And once again, because I am leaning on you to take the children, and if you don't take lead on taking the children and doing all the things you need to do to take them out, or for me to go, then we're both in a sense stuck. And I guess that's what I want to make clear on why it's this is so dependent on each other because of our lifestyle currently. It's like if the other parent doesn't take lead and like take the children out or do whatever it is that we already agreed on, then it makes it difficult for the other parent to then go do it or to work. So I remember we were talking about this, and you said that part of your resistance to fully stepping in as, a dad is from your own childhood, like that you have a lot of stuff there that you haven't necessarily dealt with, or, that you hadn't considered in that moment till then.
I'll dive deep. I will dive a little. Not that I don't want to dive, but I do want to stay I want to stay on a path of um
Yeah, that's fine.
but I'm
I
yeah, I
guess
mean,
the reason I want to talk about this is because so many people, right? Let's say, for instance, I'm just going to talk about us. You were the working parent for 13 years. You weren't at home with the kids. And now you've come into this position, this role where you are at home with the kids, but I'm still there. But anytime that you have to be alone with them, there's been this resistance where you didn't know why. And I guess the reason I want to highlight this a bit is because I am sure that there's a lot of couples in our situation, right? Where there's one parent who stays at home, the other one who works all the time. Then the one who stays at home, whenever they try to get that free time, it just doesn't happen. And I guess what I want to highlight is, why is that not happening? And granted, you can only answer for yourself why that's not happening. I want to use this as a prompt for other people to dig deeper into themselves on, why are you resistant to being a parent? Why are you resistant to showing up for your kids fully when your partner needs to leave?
yeah. You know,
Taking a deep breath.
um, I didn't have the best parents growing up, and I don't I'm working through some resentment and anger that I have towards them. I know that they did the best they could with what they had at the time. And my thought process and stories that sometimes still come to my head up until recently, like a few days ago, last week, is that Jasil is a better parent than me. And I am scared to mess up my children. And
And
that's
I don't think I'm a better parent.
and so I, where I'm going with that is like I've been running away from that. And by no means do I don't have intentions of running away from that anymore. Like one thing that I've been holding with within myself the last 4 months, and since about August when I've made this shift, is that like um the nice guy concept that came back for me, and I was holding back my emotions and my authenticity to Jasil. And I realized that I do want time alone as well. Like we as humans process better when we're alone. And that doesn't mean we don't want to be with someone. We don't want to be with our kids. It's just that we process things um, better when we're alone. And that in order for us to really reach our fullest potential, we need time apart. And going going back to the decision to go into RV, part of it was to spend more time together, to get to know each other more and things of that. But we also did have a vision to have time to find our passion and purpose. And the first 4 to 5 months, I think 5 months was where things maybe started to shift a little bit, was the first 4 to 5 months, like we were getting to know each other a lot. For me, I was really into my purpose. I had a client, or two clients. Um, I was doing my podcast consistently. Like, I was interviewing men. I was out there, and I for the first time in my life, I felt like I was living my purpose. And I don't want to jump off on a ledge and say that I got scared and I just reverted, because I don't know. But what I do know is that I started to veer away. I started to take a step back. And one thing that I've learned in this journey is that when you step into the work that you're doing, male or female, it's not that everything is just going to stop and your life is going to be better and you're going to have this great self-control and emotional intelligence and all this other thing. It's that we are going to become more aware when these things arise. The situation arises after and after. And so I am I've reframed what's been going on in our relationship within myself, and realized that it took me 4 months to realize that I was not doing what I needed to be doing for myself. And um and I realized that, I love spending time with my wife and kids. I think that you can attest that. I love spending time with you all, but me showing up the best that I can be for Jasil, as a lover, as a husband, as a father, or not a father to Jasil, but as a provider, co-creating everything of that nature, and showing up for my kids, the best possible way. I have to chase my purpose. I have to put time in fulfilling my purpose in life, because when I'm not doing that, a man without purpose, like, there's no direction, right? And for me, my purpose has helped me fuel this, and I've started to understand better that with structure comes softness, and there has to be a balance. So I'm not when I made the comment the other day that, like, my mission is more important than my wife, my mission is important. And the reason why it's important is because if I don't do my mission, I can't show up and be emotionally available and be present and enjoy the time that I get to spend with you and spend with the kids if I'm not doing that.
Yeah, so that's a big, part of this journey, and recognizing how everything from our entire life plays a role in how we act today, and the choices we make and decisions we make, and how it manifests into our lives. So that is the importance I see in going backwards sometimes in our lives, and seeing the patterns and recognizing them, is not so much to dwell and to go back and say, like, oh, I really hated this, and or did you remember that time? Is more like a reflection, like, why is this happening now, and why is this happening the way it's happening? And that is where, like, for us, it's been so important for us to take a moment and step back and see, is this really something between us and our dynamic, or is it something from our own childhood that's coming up for us that now it's playing this role in our relationship? And like Alex said, a lot of me not being able to get away from the family, away from the kids, and him fully taking over is, you know, his own thought and story that he's created in his head that I'm a better parent. Like, I by no means think I'm a better parent. I've done plenty of things that I am not proud of, to my kids. I've screamed at them, you know, like the whole works. I'm not perfect, and that is a work in progress. The difference is, and I tell him this all the time, I was like, treat yourself with grace, because I've had 9 years doing this. And that's what I tell him. I was like, I've had my, you know, childhood shit come up early on for me, and I've dealt with a lot of it. And by no means, like I said, it's not like, oh yeah, I dealt with it, now it's over, it's done, you know, it's gone. Like, why do I scream at my kids? Because I saw that growing up, right? And even though I know it's wrong and it's not something I strive to do and it's something I want to change, it still happens. And I know it happens because that was the example that I was given, and that's what happened to me growing up all the time. So once again, what I tell him is, you know, have patience, where I've had plenty of time to play with this and work on it. You're just beginning your journey, in a sense, of a year ago, where he really chose to dive inwards and start looking at these things. And with anything in our lives, like anytime you're feeling stuck, something doesn't feel good, you're wondering the patterns, like why are you stuck in a certain pattern, you have to go back. It rarely ever is from our adulthood. Usually the first 7 years and then maybe the 7 after, but those first 7 years are literally the foundation of where we are today, and that is what has formed us to be who we are. And that is as important to know, that even where you weren't verbal and you think that you didn't have a memory, right? Let's say that 1 to 4 years old or something like that, your body has stored that. Like, that is in your body. That is not forgotten. There is nothing forgotten. Everything is stored inside of us. And going backwards to release that, you know, through whatever means. Some people need to dance, need to scream, need to, you know, get it out, need to write, need to be creative, finding those outlets. But that's where I have found nature to bring me back inwards to myself and get in tune with these parts of myself that I haven't necessarily, you know, recognized or realized before. Like, why is this happening? And, you know, brings us back to me being in this place of, you know, you're holding me back. It's also a dynamic I've seen played in my parents' relationship there, you know, my whole life. Of my dad was working full time all the time. We got to see him a few hours on Sundays, maybe some evenings, but rarely ever. He ran his own business. He opened and closed it, so we rarely got to see him. And my mom, going to college, used to take us to school. Like, I remember sitting in my mom's college classes for her to get a degree. And it was always this, you know, it was like an unsaid thing that his business came before anything she did, because that is what paid the bills and that is what put food on the table. So anything she did has always come secondary. And, you know, maybe part of me is so against that because I saw it and I know it. And I'm just like, I am not going to fall in that same track. Like, I refuse to fall in that track. And, you know, it took her many years, in a sense, to gain traction in what she wanted to do in her life. And still, once again, she became stagnant, and she has stayed where she is for the last 20 years. And, you know, I'm not going to speak to the reasons of why, but I see that. And I always tell myself, like, I don't want to be that. Like, I want to do more. I want to break out of this. I don't want to just do the one thing and then I'm stuck doing that one thing for the next 40 years. And, you know, coming up on 9 years of being a stay-at-home parent, I really have been feeling the, like, being stuck in a cycle, being stagnant of like, well, I've only done this. And granted, like, I've done a million other things too. But for me, it, you know, when I look back a lot of times, I'm like, well, all I've done is being a stay-at-home mom. Like, no, I've done a lot more things, and I can find all those things I've done. I want to be more of value and impact to other people. I don't want to be in this little bubble where I'm just like with my kids and with my husband all the time. And I think that that's a big part of me feeling stuck, is that I'm not interacting with others the way I want to be right now. So that's my job, to push myself out of this bubble, out of this shell that I've contained myself in. And that's been my process in the last 6 months, is trying to break free of this bubble, being vulnerable to other people and showing them like, this is real life. This is what happens behind everyone's perfect Instagram, picture or whatever. Is like, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and life isn't perfect. And sometimes we, where we can say like, oh yeah, a year ago we fixed all of this, like, no, it's still coming up a year later.
Yeah. And I think what's important is to say that uh, leaning in with curiosity and being open is going to help us get through this, and showing the way. I wanted to talk about a couple things, and it's gonna get into a little bit of vulnerability with myself, and that's okay. But I'm gonna just preface this, that this all comes back to why watching porn is not okay, and why um, the direction of the sex industry and how it affects young men more specifically. I know it affects women, but I'm going to speak on just the men's side. Um, it shows up big in my relationship now still. And just a little backstory: I started watching porn and coping with masturbation when I was 8 years old. My dad would beat the shit out of me. We'd have these pretty intense arguments, and yelling, and I get beat, and I would go in my room and I would cope with masturbating, and I did that for my whole life after that point. And I didn't think that it was a problem, like kids, they explore, all kids explore, but I was doing it at a rate that now that I see was, I was coping with. I wanted connection, and I just wanted things I wanted to connect. I wanted attention, and so like I got that through sex, or through, excuse me, masturbation, and watching porn. And I did that my whole teenage life, and it skewed what a little bit. I had a little bit of self-confidence issues, because I was so involved into what porn dictated or depicted, that I was like, oh, like, I'm not ready to have sex. And so like that when I did have sex at 18, I lost my virginity at 18. It was, like, I was very scared, and that has played a big part of my life. Fast forward that to our relationship, and any time that things went wrong, or rejection, or me instead of me articulating what I was feeling, I would go in the bathroom, or I would go hide, and I would masturbate. And I say all of this, and someone out there is probably like, "Why are you talking about this right now?" But the reason why that's important is that at about the 6 month mark, or the five, like I said, where the transition point in all this, where things were like, "Oh shit," um, I started, instead of masturbating, I started to like have this unhealthy obsession with Giselle. And what I mean by that is, like, I would start to objectify her, and all I would want is just superficial sex. And don't get me wrong, there'd be times where we've had great sex, but like it's been few and far between in the last 4 months, right? It's really been like very quick, and um it's been like, hey, let me get you off, let me get off type thing. Um, like I said, it's not been all, but I've seen myself go back into the cycle that I am coping through that connection piece. And what drove us so far apart in the first part was because I wasn't communicating, I wasn't leaning in and opening up and saying, "Hey, I'm feeling these feelings," and having that conversation. So, um, with the coping with sex, like, I started to realize that I was feeling abandoned a little bit. And I'm saying this not because I'm asking Giselle for any answers. I'm saying this because I've realized, since I've started my self-love practices again, since I started my spiritual practices again, that no one can meet my needs other than me. I can't expect my partner or my spouse to meet my needs, because I need to meet my needs first. And um we were having a conversation with someone the other day, and I said, I no longer want superficial sex. I don't want that. I've been exposed. Me and Jasil, we got to feel what soul scratching sex is, where where it just is amazing. It's a different level, and I don't want to go back to the superficial sex. So a lot of what I was realizing is um, a lot of my resentment, anger that I was subconsciously projecting, I was trying to cope through sex. And when I said that I was playing it small, when things were when we were doing our thing and things were good, I started to say, okay, this is where I wanted to be in my relationship. Let me just get complacent now, and let me drop off of what I was doing. And I mentioned that before earlier, and I felt safe with Jasil. I felt safe with living in that I say old construct, but what I'm coming to understand is that I'm not safe because I was still not happy, and I was keeping things internally the last 4 months of like, hey, I want time to myself. And I want to say that just because we're having these conversations doesn't mean that we're not, totally shutting off the RV life in the future. But we know that we want to follow our purpose and reignite our passion within our relationship by following our purpose, right? Like all this time together, we've we've we haven't seen each other the same. Like, don't get me wrong, yes, I've been coping with sex, and I tell her, like when we were walking around and she's not wearing, clothes and stuff like that, I'm very, touchy. I talk to her, things of that nature. But I realized that my appreciation um has gone away, has gone away, and not in a negative way. Like I still find just so very attractive, and like that's it's not an issue, but it's just that when you're with someone 24/7, it's hard to miss them. And that's
It's quite impossible.
yeah. So, like one of the topics that we were having, and I guess this is something that you may choose to talk on or not, I don't know, but like uh she was saying, like, you want me all the time, and I've only wanted you within my ovulation cycles, sexual wise. And I had this thought, and I kept telling her, and she was telling me, she's like, still, like, you want, I'll let her talk, but you want me more than I want you. But I realized that my highly um desire for sex the last few months has been tied to coping. And what validated that is I've sat with myself a lot, as I read in a book. Jasil's been doing a lot of research on gene keys. And one of my gene keys, my life purpose gene key, which is 14, it says that if I am not fulfilling my purpose and I'm compromising with myself all the time, that basically when things are suppressed, they come out sideways, and it would come out in impotency through sexual vibration, activity, things of that nature. And so, like, when you don't have control of your life, you're going to resort to sex as a control mechanism, if that makes sense. I'm talking to you, but if anybody listening, just to break that down.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said is what I felt, and maybe, for people going through this in the moment, you can't really see what's going on. And this is why this awareness, reflection, conversations will bring light to the situation. And as we had these conversations and started talking about it, well, it's going on in my head. I'm having my own conversations a lot, but it took a few weeks before I verbalized any of this to Alex, and same for him. And that's something that we're working on, verbalizing these things sooner, because the sooner you verbalize it, the sooner you put it out there, the sooner that you can see it and actually fix it, like find a solution, work towards solving it, versus just having these conversations in your head. But once we started having all these conversations, I realized that yes, that the time frame of him moving away from everything he was doing and the time frame of me desiring him less line up, and it makes sense. And to me, that's why it's so important that both of us fulfill our missions, and both of us are driven by our purpose and doing the things we want to do, because it's desirable for me to have a man who's driven. I don't want a man who's just, doing nothing or staying at home or just taking care of the kids. Like, unless that is his purpose and he's like absolutely happy doing that, then it wouldn't matter, because it's about that energy, right? Like, that man is going to be fully like, this is what I love to do. I am doing what I love, and the woman's going to feel that. And that is my thing, is like, it is undesirable to me to have a man without drive, without purpose, without mission. That I want a man who knows where he's going and he's headed in that direction, versus someone who's just stuck in a circle, in a cycle. And once again, when it's happening, I don't know what's happening. I just know that I no longer desire him. And I'm just like, nope, don't want to have sex. Nope, 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 nope. And then, once again, when we started having these conversations and I look back, it was the timelines coincide. So many times for us, when we've gone through this, it's the same thing, like these ebbs and flows of like, everything's going fine because everyone's going towards where they want. And then we get stuck in these loops. And now we're driven apart because we're both, cycling. It's like spinning the wheels in mud, and we're just like spinning, 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 but there's no traction forward. And that direction, that drive is what gives us that, traction to move forward towards something. So it's not that we don't have the same vision, but we also have our own visions for like ourselves, of who we want to be and what kind of impact we want to have with other people.
Yeah, and I want to throw into there. You're talking about ebbs and flows and staying in cycles. This is a direct reflection of what happened in the last few days. Sunday I was like internally keeping everything in. Jasil had said something that wasn't, like I did something, and I think maybe we were both on edge, and it pissed me off. But instead of verbalizing it, and I was already creating this story built up in my head anyways, that like I needed to get away. Like I packed all my shit on Sunday, and I said, hey, I'm leaving. I just up at like 1 p.m. said I'm leaving.
Well, we were in New York City, and we knew that Alex had to head back to Virginia, but he originally had said, I'm going to leave on Monday. And then Sunday he just like packed all his stuff up, and he's like, I'm going to Virginia early. And I was just like, oh. And I knew he was upset. I didn't know what, and I was like, you know what, whatever. Like, I don't feel like dealing with this right now. I don't feel like having this conversation with you. Because typically when Alex gets like this, he closes off and he keeps saying that nothing's wrong and that he needs to figure it out, and he doesn't really want to talk. And I am to the point that I was like, you don't want to talk, I'm not going to sit here and try to dig it out of you. Like, yeah. You don't want to talk, cool, go. Like, and so be it.
And I opened up a bit about her a little bit after I realized, well, because I was so angry, like I was creating these stories and I was building all this anger and resentment and things that weren't necessary. My physiology changed. Like, I started to get this bad headache. I was feeling nauseous. Like, when I remember before I was diagnosed with 5 brain tumors, I would have these episodes, and it would really like kind of throw me off. I felt like I was about to have those episodes. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stay. And as I sat in the room and I was breathing a little bit, I realized that I was okay, and that every other time in my relationship with Jasil, I ran away. And that if I want to get to the point that I want to be with her, and I want to grow, and I want to take that next step, and I want to come closer, I need to lean in. I need to lean in and lean in with curiosity and openness and willingness to attack what's going on inside. And what has happened when I chose to do that was the last 4 days or 3 days, I've been more vibrant, more determined than ever to attack my purpose. And the reason being is I've been able to see why it's so important to have a purpose. I lived someone else's purpose for 13 years. And when I came to the point like I was just miserable all the time. That was contagious. And so I was like, oh, you know what? Let me just not do anything. Let me get into my relationship. Let me heal all of that. And then I realized I don't want to be a stay-at-home dad. And I don't say that in a negative aspect. I want to be an integrated man. I want to be a man that is present and grounded for my father or for my kids and there for my kids. And when I'm in these emotional states, or when I'm pulled back, and there's resentment and anger and I'm to myself, I'm not present and enjoying the moment, not only with them but with her. And that's what's been missing the last couple months, because I was compromising, as my gene key says, I was compromising with myself. And I wasn't compromising in the sense of like, oh yeah, babe, you can work more, and I'm not going. It was that I wasn't doing the spiritual aspect that I needed to be doing. I wasn't meditating daily like I was. I wasn't journaling. I wasn't reading. I wasn't writing. I wasn't doing cold immersion. I wasn't doing the things that got me to where I was at. And that's why it's important, even when things are going well, that the consistency's there. It's not because you want to keep it for your relationship. You want to keep it for yourself. Like I was so clear. My mental clarity was the best it's ever been. And I'm back to there the last 4 days. And I realized that, like the what we were talking about, the less desirability, is because like now that I look back at my last 2 to 3 months, I'm like, I don't even like myself. How can I expect someone else to like myself if I can't even like see attraction in myself? So, all of coming to realization with all of this, that is why my mission is more important than my wife, right? And my kids, is because if I can't do that, I can't show up for them. And in turn, like, what's going to come of that? Like, someone asked me the other day, are you doing this just for Jasil? Like, basically, like, is she stringing you? I say stringing you along, but is she, like, are you doing this for her?
Like, yeah, it was kind of like, am I forced, why not just simplify things? If you want to work, just work. And why are you doing all this? If it's hard, like, then just stop, kind of thing. And it's like, because it's so much more than that. And plus, because I'm not forcing him to. Like, I made it clear that I was not going to force Alex to do anything that he didn't want to do. And that was the conversation we had a year ago. I said, look, I'm doing all this work. You don't want to, that's fine. But I am not going to stay with you, because I am unwilling to stay with someone who's not willing to do the work, because there's no growth in that. It's stagnant. You're going to stay there and I'm going to keep moving. And then I have to like try to break this down to you, try to live life like I don't know what's on the other side. And I'm like, no, that's okay. You can stay there. I'm going to go.
Yeah. And so what I say is like, I never chose to do this because Jasil is like, hey, do it. I chose this because when I look back at everything in my life, and I'm saying this because there's an importance in what I'm about to say, is like, my biggest success is my relationship with Jasil. Not because, oh, like she chose me and we started this family and, like we get to have sex and we get to like we get to, exchange energies. No, my biggest success is around all of the tribulations, around all the challenges, around the trauma within myself. Like that's my biggest success, being able to step up and step into that. And so like now I look at my life moving forward, and I am committed to a life of helping men turn their pain into their power, and speaking and inspiring people, and living an abundant life with Jasil and my kids. Right? Like the dynamic right now has been hard, and I chose to turn into the old cycle, but that can't happen. And like I said, the RV life, it makes it tough. Is it impossible? I don't think it's impossible, but it makes it very tough, where the resistance won for me, right? Like the resistance overcame the ability to put things in place to do that.
I mean, I don't think it's the RV life. Once again, I think it's just that it's easier to go back to what you've known always. Like, it is easy to fall back into the track that's already, you've walked it a million times, and it's easy to just fall back into that. And that is the issue with the majority of the people, right? the same reason of like, well, why are you doing this? If it's hard, if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. It's like, well, because when you have a taste of what's on the other side, you know how much it's worth to start carving that new path and to stop walking the one that you've been on that hasn't led you anywhere for the last 10 years. And that's where I'm at. Like, I know what's on the other side and I want more of that. I don't want to keep doing what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Like, I'm ready to change. I'm ready to elevate. I'm ready to create that new path. And, you know, as we know, building any new path is, it's not, you know, it's not going to come simple. It's not going to come without its obstacles. It's not going to come without its work. And that is the work that we're putting in now. And just like, you know, Gene Keys 9, which is my purpose, talks about gaining that traction. But once you do, you know, you're off. Like, you just have to take that next step. But once you create the pathway, now it's yours to travel back and forth. Now it's yours to go as fast as you want down that path because you've built it.
Yeah, and I'll say that as we've transitioned to, you know, when we would have hard conversations, we would point at each other, but we've transitioned now of like solution based. And one of the things that we implemented very shortly before the Thanksgiving holiday was like having a schedule and having you know, work time. And so that's something that we both are looking forward to, of implementing a schedule to where I have the kids for 35 hours. When I say 35 hours to 40 hours, like the amount that Giselle wants to work. And for myself, well, I'm going to play around with my hours a little bit because I do want to be in the supportive capacity. Um, that's something that I want to do, but I know that I'm not going to compromise with my purpose. So we're rearranging structure, and and with the remaining time, we're switching from quantity of time to quality time, right? And that's one thing that I learned about Giselle. I mean, I've always known about Giselle, but it's highlighted yesterday was like intentionality, how important intentionality is in her life. And that goes to a genetic, you know, goes down to a genetic cellular level for her. Is like intentionality is very important. So um I am moving forward with focus on the time that we spend together, maybe the 10 or how many hours it is, that the quality of time is there. And then also with me and her, creating that quality time, not quantity, but quality of time of spending together. You know, and that's for now. Like things ebb, you know, like she said, and I know this, and we all know this, is things ebbs and flow. You know, what works for us now may have to shift or you know, in the future. And just because, you know, like when I look at people like Tony Robbins and Danny Morales or Morel, Morel, right?
Right.
Sorry, Danny, if you ever listen to this podcast, which you will. Anyways, people like that, they they still want to be with their significant other. They still want to be with their family, but they had to sacrifice to put it all in to build their purpose. And once their purpose gain traction, like Giselle talked about, momentum, like it's easier to create systems in place for you to be able to spend quality time with your kids, with your wife, with or husband, and you know, with friends, family, so on and so forth. And right now we are in the very beginning phases of building our purposes so we can chase our dream, you know, our dream life. And like one thing that my eyes have been open to in the 2 days that I've really dive into it was, you know, for months we talked about like I want a life book. I remember in August we talked about like, hey, like I really want to buy a life book, but it's not the best time to purchase it. And I said, let's, you know, I think we both agreed to purchase it if it came on sale at Black Friday, and it did. And we purchased this program called Life Book, where it's broken into 12 areas of your life, and you are very intentional and specific on what you want, right? You talk about your beliefs, you talk about your vision, your purpose, your strategy for all these 12 areas of your life. And as couples, the first 5 is individual. It talks about health and fitness, and you know, I'm only on health and fitness, so as I go,
Intellectual, I think intellectual, emotional, things like that.
so like the first 5 are tied to you, but then for us, the last 7 our as a couple. So we'll do ours individually. We'll come together and we'll talk about how we want our life to live. And what better way when couples are I don't think we're on a different page, but when couples are not on the same page, to get on the same page. So Life Book is something that
I
his
mean, we are on different pages with certain things. We're definitely not on the same page with like parenting and money and things like that. So
yeah, so I appreciate that because I was very vague. You know, one thing that I am looking forward to in this Life Book journey is getting on the same page monetarily wise with Jasil, and then also um, parenting wise. You know, we've had a parenting coach for a while, and I've had a hard time leaning fully in, and so I know that there's, you know, I'm reading a book called Do the Work, and I told Jasil she should read it because there's something in there, and I'll leave it for her to find it for herself. But there's something in there that I think provides so much value in our journey of going into our purpose and why it's important to do the work, right? Why it's important not to hesitate and just move forward. And so, um, you know, like Life Book is is a good tool that we're using, and then on obviously like holding each other to the schedule that we're putting. You know, I I can say one of the big things, and I'll turn it back over to you, is one of the big things on why the schedule was so like I had so much resistance to the schedule is because I was in a lot of things in my life I was trying to make a perfect schedule and that's why I like the Do the Workbook is it doesn't talk it talks about doing it now and you can revise it later type thing and and with the schedule I would get very overwhelmed because I'm like I want to give her this time, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, and I would be holding on to that and then the day would come and we don't do it and I'm like, you know, like I am tired of being a man out of my integrity. You know, I've told Jasil many things in our relationship. I say promised her many things, and I've let the ball down. And she doesn't deserve that, nor do I, because it's important to understand that when I say that I want, like I promise her that, something, I'm not only making that promise to her, but I'm making that promise to myself. And and I've been letting myself down. I don't want that anymore. I don't want that for myself.
and I'll say one thing with speaking when these things are coming up. They say it, there's so I took a course on the conscious leadership tools a couple of years ago, and then I've been following their work ever since, and I dive into those tools almost daily with my own life and everything. I remember early on I Alex and I would use them a lot, and I mean in a sense that is what we're doing now. And in these tools they say no relationship can ever be boring. They say if your relationship is boring, it means you're not being honest with each other. And people are like, wait, what are you talking about? And it's because in honesty, so practicing candor, when you're completely honest with someone, it requires three things. And it's not just honesty, right? So truth, saying the whole truth and nothing but the truth. It also requires openness, and it also requires awareness. So to say everything that you're thinking, say everything that you're feeling, saying all the emotions you're actually experiencing, and every single thought that comes through your mind, your relationship can never be boring. Because as we just explained, there are things that we keep from each other for months or weeks at a time, and it reaches like its boiling point where it just has to spill out. And if we were to just do it in the moment, right, as this is coming up, like, hey, today I am thinking this and that, or today when you said this, I felt this, or this was my thought, then these things wouldn't happen. And then the relationship would always be exciting because you're not keeping anything from anyone. And I do practice that to a certain extent for most things, but even, I keep bigger things where I'm afraid, of the reaction. And that is the story that we created in our heads, right? It's like, well, if I say that, then he is going to, or if I say this, then he is going to. So therefore, I'm not going to say it because I don't want to deal with the reaction and I don't want to deal with what comes next. And that was a big part of me keeping all these thoughts and feelings that I was having recently and emotions of me thinking like, you know what, I don't know if I do want to be with him. I think I want to be by myself because I don't want to deal with having to create schedules with someone and somebody telling me like, you can't work past dinner time and you can't work more than 3 hours and you can't and you can't and you can't. Like, I don't want to do that. And it wasn't that I was afraid to say that. I didn't want to deal with his reaction because I created a story in my head that the reaction was going to be this big drawn out thing and we're going to be dealing with it for weeks. And I just kept it to myself for a long time. And then when we had the conversation, it literally didn't even have a reaction. It was like, he was just like, okay, yeah, I get that. And I was like, what the heck? Like I was expecting, you know, something bigger from him. So, you know, I guess my takeaway from all that is we cannot function from the stories we create in our heads because reality is we don't know the truth. We don't know the result of when we get our truths out there, what really is going to happen. And oftentimes, if anything, when we are practicing candor and we're in our full truth and openness and awareness, is actually a relief for the other person because what they've been feeling and what they've been thinking and everything, right? Because you're living in the same household, you're having this energetic exchange daily, whether you want to or not. If you're within 6 foot of another person, you're exchanging energies. They're already probably feeling what you're feeling, and there's a reason why you're feeling it. And the same thing that he was talking about, energies are contagious, right? There was a reason why I was processing and having all these thoughts and feelings, and it's because he was too. And it goes both ways. So like we could have ended the cycle months ago by just speaking our truths. You know, like this could have been over 2 months ago. Like now it's December 1st. And we just, you know, in the past couple of weeks started having these conversations where, you know, we both agreed that this started in August, but neither of us had the courage to just speak up and say, hey, there's been a shift, something's changing, and I don't feel good about the way this feels right now. And, you know, once again, we were both scared and we didn't talk about it. And it just kept going and going and going and it gets worse and worse and worse. Until finally you're like, you know what? I freaking hate you. I don't want to be with you, you know? And it's like, and it's not necessarily that that's the truth.
Yeah. And one thing that I really want to say that's important as a man, um, and just speaking relationally, like being in a relationship with a woman, right, is that oftentimes, she talked about like she had created this story in her head of like that there was going to be some reactivity, and historically there was, right? I can't
Yeah.
deny history, right? Like history tells us a pattern. But what I can do is I can take responsibility and I can create action and turn that responsibility and action into a different story. I can create my future. And one thing that if I've really put a lot of focus on in this last year was being able to hold space for Jasil in a way that I wasn't reactive, because that was where a lot of our juice was. That was where a lot of our, we're very spicy people anyways. We're very vibrant. Like people say that all the time. You guys are like vibrant. Your energy is
I'm
crazy.
sweet.
You know what?
I'm sweet. I'm not spicy.
You are sweet. Yes, you are. Anyways, uh,
Coconut water sweet.
yeah, you are. Damn, she threw me off. She said something. I'm in this sex challenge to where like I'm really honing in my life force, at least until Dominican Republic. We're going to Dominican Republic next month, but I'm honing in.
No, it's this month. It's in 25 days.
Oh yeah, so for the next 25 days, no sexual intercourse for myself, and I'm really.
Well, no, it's not just sexual intercourse. You said you're going to retain your semen, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so it's semen retention for 25 days because
yeah.
that means no masturbation, no anything. And that is a sexual practice for you, those listening out there. If you've never heard of it, look into it. We're not going to get into that right now.
Yeah.
But anyway.
With her coconut juice comment, it really threw me off.
Because I'm not talking about coconut water.
Yeah. That's great. If the thought comes up, I'll type it up. I'll make sure I put it on Instagram or something like that. But oh yeah, I got it. I pulled it from the dungeon. Reactivity, right? Holding the space, like I saw it, and I had this thought yesterday, is like she had said something when we were having this conversation Sunday night, that like she was afraid of the reaction. And I was so grounded. And one thing that I've learned, like when I'm really trying to hold space, is that I'm listening to what you're saying, but I'm actively listening. So like I'm not really trying to, I'm starting to try not to respond, right? Like there's this method of uh of active listening that I learned when I was in coaching certification. So I was listening, and then I thought about that, and I'm like, damn, she said that. Like there's more there. But like fortunately, one thing I've learned in the last year is we when we start to heal ourselves, we heal others too, right? Like we are one. All of us are one. There's this unconscious collective, and when we heal ourselves, we're healing that unconscious collective, and that's helping others heal. And like I revert back to the early beginnings, the early August, when Jasil had a big breakthrough, and then a couple weeks later, I had a big breakthrough, and and now like I think us going forward with our purpose is going to help us heal and come together even closer as a couple, because now we have the ability to desire each other, to miss each other, to um understand that for me, within my purpose is also to be the very best man that I can be for myself, for my family, for my wife, and for my kids.
And I will say, when I look back on my life, as far as my dynamic of, well, why do I kind of, I mean, I don't kind of, I usually lean into the separation of, we need to come apart so I can figure my own thing out. Is that I've always been a very independent person before, I started having kids and married. And now it's like, I felt for a long time like I'm in a cage, like I'm caged up and I can't do whatever I want and all these things. And even, when I was 17 years old, what I did to change my life wasn't like, oh, I'll just go to a college upstate. Like I flew across the country all the way from New York City to California to go to a completely different state where I knew like two people at the time, three people, and they were going to be like 4 hours away from me. So I was completely in a town by myself, knew no one. That has been my go-to, is to just like wipe the slate clean and start fresh. And what I'm learning in this relationship is, what's tough for me is to stay where I am and make that beautiful. And that is the lesson that I'm learning, is to stop trying to run away from it all. And it's not that I'm like, I wouldn't say like I'm always trying to run away from everything, but when things aren't going my way, I am easily to discard and say, you know what, this isn't working for me. I'm done. Let's go somewhere else. Um, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I am choosing to see what there is to learn from staying versus running away. And one thing I can say is like, that's a big difference between Alex and I, where he has always been fully committed of like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm always like, I'm running away. And, I thank him all the time for not running from me, because I'm like, we would just have left at the first sight of an issue, because I'm always like, this isn't working, fuck it, and that really is my what's it called, my go-to, my default is like, it's not working, fucking get rid of it, kind of thing. And I'm it's something I'm still processing, right? And I'm still learning, and I'm still discovering what there is here for me. But it is, I guess my point here is that it is a pattern I've recognized within myself. And I'm becoming curious of why this pattern exists, why it's here, what's it trying to teach me, or what is it that I have to learn from not defaulting to that, for, relationships mostly. I don't think any other aspects of my life I really have that reaction. But when it comes to relationships with people and things aren't working, I choose to run away, to just go away from it all. So
That's I appreciate that. Like that's the first time that I've heard that. Um, and I say that it's not been easy being able to hold that container for someone that says, "Hey, I fuck it, I want to leave." And
use concrete, not straw.
yeah, and so like I want to I also want to, like I think being open and honest is like I've had many like thoughts of running away. And the thing is this that I think that I've realized in my life is that I'm committed to hard. Like if I look at lessons that I've learned in life and like since I've been in relationship with Jacille's identified it years before I have. And I'm like, oh, we'll be all right. And I have to live the process myself. And I'm like, damn it. Like, why didn't I just listen to you? But where I'm going with that is that like we often, we run from resistance. We run from what's hard, and there's growth and there's juice there. And I just honestly, at the end of the day, like I'm so
Like,
go ahead.
go ahead, finish.
I was gonna say at the end of the day, I'm really, one of the gratitude points that I'm gonna talk with Jacille later, and I'll just say it now. So I got two more, is that I'm very grateful that I'm in a relationship, and I have expanded to a level that I'm willing to consistently grow, and that my partner is too. And and go ahead for first into that.
My thought process is not that I run away when things are hard, because I've never seen myself as running away from things that are hard. My issue more comes in relationships with people, where I think it's more like you're not benefiting me. And if we can't figure this out quickly, then I don't want to partake in it. It's more like my thought process and the way and I could say it's probably the reason why I've never really had a best friend. I've never really had close. I can't say there's anyone who's known me fully intimately all the way. Like the closest thing I've had to a best friend is my older sister, or and even that relationship, I can't say that it's been 100% authentic all the time. Like we had our rough moments, and same thing. I was just kind of like, okay, it's not working. Cool. Bye. Like, see ya. And, reconvening, versus like what we're doing right now, which granted, we're married, we have 4 kids. It's different dynamic. It's finding the solutions and truly like working through it to return back to like what we know to be true, versus like just saying, you know what, you're not working for me, bye. And maybe that, in my human design chart, I have the 3740 community channel. And it's also my incarnation cross, that I'm meant to bring people together in a sort of network and bargain with people and see what's working, what's not, and how to hold boundaries for others. Basically like, this is right, this is wrong, this is, and I'm learning that right now through this relationship the most, of when things don't work, you can't just run away, because that's, when you are a community where you're an essential integral part of that community, you can't just dismiss it. You can't just, it's like your body, oh, my leg's not working, okay, cut it off. Like, that's not what we do, right? We're like, our leg's not working. Okay, what do we have to do to fix it? Do we have to massage it, ice it, heat it, fix it, or exercise it? And that is like the way I'm starting to think about my relationships and the people I come in contact with, and people that I've, gone deep with, is I can't just throw it away. I can't just hit backspace and delete. It has to be something that has to be integrated inwards. And that's not saying that, we have to stay married for the rest of our lives and this is the way it always will be. No. And we have to do this instead of talking it through, really figuring it out and seeing what's really there, what's the real issue. Because once again, we know that anytime that we have a problem and we're unhappy, it's not the other person, it's usually within ourselves, or something that we've lacked, or a boundary that we haven't put up in that relationship. And it's usually one or the other, right? Either you're not holding your boundaries firmly, or you're not choosing to look inward and say, you know what, my happiness is my responsibility, not anyone else's. So that is what I'm, once again, I'm just a lot of, I guess, doing this podcast also brings me to many realizations and other things that I haven't necessarily thought about. And it just brings it all full circle.
You want to go more? You want to elaborate a little bit on what you're saying?
As far as what?
You said it brings it all full circle, like
that, our relationship, what it's teaching me for the future of what I need to learn, is that you can't just delete people out of your life or the part that you don't like. It has to be integrated, just like a body part, and I made a post the other day and I said, the definition of humanity is that we're parts of a whole. We're all like little parts of a whole, and that's really what we are. We see ourselves like individuals, and we're all in different bodies, but in the grand scheme of things, we're all a piece of the whole. And if one piece isn't working right, it's not our job to just kill it or get rid of it or cut it off or send it away. Our job is to bring it inwards and support it and integrate it into our lives.
yeah. And what's funny is like, I want to make a statement and then say something funny. Is, you know, I wasn't I wasn't even close to meeting, like being willing to flex I say flex, but like willing to make change or go towards, growth a year and a half ago, right? Like, and that's the most important, I think, in any relationship, is that two people have to willingly choose to choose a path of constant growth, and not only, self-discovery, but grow together, right? And integrate, like you said, integrate that. And the funny thing is, like, when a lot of people that are not in the spiritual realm, and I can speak from this because when Jasil was doing this, I'm like, this is some hooty hoo, like what the hell, like I don't believe it. But we have an app called the Pattern, and a lot of times she gets, and I even get these for myself, like I need independence, I need space, I need time, like I need
And
all
then the
these.
pattern's like, yeah, here's your message for today.
Yeah, and I was holding that in, and I'm like, holy shit, like that is true, right? And then the second thing, it talks about like our relationship, our romantic pattern, and um everything that's associated with our relationship. It talks about Jasil being pushed to limits that she's never been before, and lessons that she's learning. And as she said all that right now, I just laugh because you know, I was there was a time in my life where spirituality was nothing, right? Because at a young age, I was put into a system, a Southern Baptist, that there was judgment, and if you didn't do this, you were going to hell. And I really try to conform that up until I met Jasil. I really try to conform that, and and stay in the religious system. And now, as I've gone into spirituality, I've realized that it's about love, and it's about um, abundance, and it's about giving, and it's about, like what judgments that you have are actually reflections of yourself. So I've these last 3 days have been amazing. Don't get me wrong. And I say amazing, like in the sense of, and I can only speak, I know just still with the kids, but like it's been amazing to be able to understand that I've been off of my path. And I don't want to live a life like I previously did. And I also understand within these last 3 days, I've been able to say, like, the understanding and finding my purpose again has been great. And I also want to share that with her and with my kids. Like, I want to share the best version of myself to the people I love the most, to Jasil and to the kids. And they haven't got that. And so, like, that is where with the direction that we're going, that's why we want to do this. That's why we're finding our, or we're choosing our purpose, and actually taking the step forward. Like, we chose our purpose a year ago, but now we're stepping in. It's because we do
Well,
want.
I say what we chose, it was more a vision, right? To discover ourselves, which I would say we did that, right? We did a lot of deep diving, we did a lot of shadow work, like we did a lot of like looking back into our lives, bringing it all up, and both of us are now clear on what we do want, which is we want to add value and impact to other people's lives in different ways, but that like we're clear on that. And I think that that was like the biggest thing, that we made a decision on that, and that is what we did. And now once again, it's come to a point where we're like, okay, we did that, and we didn't set the next vision, is the way I would put it. In like, we didn't even know that it was complete until we got into this funk again. And then that's when we both came to the realization of, oh, we actually completed that vision. That's why we're lost, because we didn't put a vision past, hey, let's figure this one thing out. And that is the importance of what Lifebook now is going to give us, is that it's going to give us multiple visions in many aspects of our lives, and the full bigger vision, so we don't lose sight of that again. So anytime that we start feeling lost, we can go back to that and say, okay, this is what we're working towards, versus like, we did a good job, made a vision, we've reached it, we've accomplished it, and now it's time to build the next 5-year vision, so we don't get lost after a year. And then knowing that, when you start creeping up on that third, fourth year, it's time to start building again for the next 5 and the next 5 and the next 5. But one last thing I would like to close out on, because we're talking a lot about everything we've done and having all these great conversations and how we process this, right? And that's awesome. But how do people like us 3 years ago start having these conversations? So you 3 years ago, yeah, like, and I guess we're for someone who was us 3 years ago, is where would you send them? What would be the next step? And right, and we have to think baby steps, because this conversation would have not been had 3 years ago. It would have just been an argument, right? So for us 3 years ago, where would you send a person like that to like have this conversation, to start talking about this? What would you advise to them? And granted, like, yes, you can reach out to us. We work with people on this level and all that, but people who are still even too scared to say, I want to pay someone to help me do this, or I want to buy a workshop or a course, like what can they do on their own, free resource? Where can they go?
Well, I think that what's important is that you are able to identify what you want in life, right? Like, so you have to really pull back of whatever
What
condition.
about if that's too hard? Like, did you know what you wanted in life 3 years ago? Baby steps, keep it easy. If
Yeah.
someone's like, this is kind of interesting, but I don't know what I want, like if I want this for me, where would you
Well,
send them?
well, I've done this. I actually do this when people reach out and they want to work with me. I put them on a little path for a week to see what changes for them in the sense of journaling, meditating, and doing some type of exercise for themselves. Like,
Okay, so break those down. So what would journaling prompts look like? What are they journaling about? Or
so I will use today. Like, I wrote on limiting beliefs, right? And that, like, oftentimes, so like what are
what is a limiting belief?
so like a limiting belief in my definition is that, like, so like when I'm experiencing happiness, I throw some type of belief of like, I don't deserve, like, fuck it, I'll use it. And I didn't want to, but I will use it. The limiting belief that kept coming up to me the last couple days as like I've been feeling this excitement is Giselle's gonna leave you. Giselle's cheating on you. And I was able to sit with that and say, no, she's not. And little Alex, you're okay. Little Alex, I'm here for you. The meditating, the journaling, the cold immersion, the exercise, everything that you're doing that I'm doing is for you. And that's enough. Like I'm here for you. And so like a limiting belief really gets you knocked off course of the happiness that you're feeling. Like you feel like you don't deserve to be, the wealthiest person or abundant person. Like what you start to put stories in your head to prevent that. So like some journaling prompts I mean, I don't have them in front of me. You put me on the spot, but like, so some journaling prompts, or you could really just journal what comes up for you at that day, right? So like oftentimes I don't give my clients journaling prompts. I say, hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to sit down in the morning and I want you to journal on what you're feeling. Maybe it was something last night, that maybe an argument, or maybe it was an observation. I want you to journal on what comes up for you. I want you to reflect on it, because all the goal in life for me is being able to create space and maintain space between to stimuli and response. So instead of reacting, I can respond. So what I've learned, not when I'm not at my peak, what I've learned is that I don't really think about how I reacted until like hours later, and then I'm like, holy crap, I shouldn't have done that. And then I see what comes up for me. Like often I come back to Giselle. I've come back to Giselle and say, hey, like I was feeling this and this and this, or I held it in, and then eventually I told her, we talked about it on Sunday. But where I'm going with this is, it doesn't have to be, don't get stuck on there needs to be a journaling prompt. It's about sitting down, and it's about putting pen to paper and really connecting with whatever's coming up for you. And wherever that goes, it goes. And then the meditating.
And the other ones, you said meditating, right?
Yeah.
And how do you meditate for people who've never meditated before? Like, what do you do during a meditation?
Well, hang on. I just meditated. Like I feel like we've been so conditioned by influencers and people in life that meditation has to be 30 minutes to an hour to 4 hours. I was listening to the Jay Shetty podcast as I was driving back, and he meditated for like 4 hours, like constantly. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm not meditating right. But then I have to take it back. It's the ability to clear the mind, right? Sit with yourself. And when a thought comes up, which it will, right? You can get back to yourself. So you pass the thought, you acknowledge it, you pass it, you focus on the breath again, right? Or
yeah, and I will say there's many forms of meditation. So there are the forms where people sit and clear the mind, and there's also walking meditations.
Yeah, I was about to go on
that. Like you can take a stroll in nature and just take in what's around you. And my biggest thing when it comes to meditation is just returning to my breath, like ensuring that I am taking deep, comfortable breaths, filling my lungs with oxygen and expelling that breath, versus like sitting there constricted. But there's also, meditations where you don't have to clear the thoughts are coming up for a reason. And what I've noticed over time is allow the thoughts to come up and just play with them. And if it's not important, you throw it out and the next one comes up. Because in those moments, right, and you'll notice the more you do it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be longer, but the more you do it, the easier this process becomes, the more natural it becomes. And then the answers that you're seeking are going to come up during these meditations, because that is what meditation is that our body is full of wisdom, of innate wisdom. And when you sit with yourself enough in silence, or maybe you become a master at meditating, you can do it in noise too, is that the answers that you're looking for are going to come up. There is no answer outside of you. Everything you seek is within you. And that is what meditation does, is that it brings you closer to self, to that answer that you're seeking.
Yeah, I was gonna add on to the other meditations, but you broke that down good. And I just want to kind of go in depth on why, for me, cold immersion and then what I've come to realize, exercise, my physical fitness is so important, is because that is a healthy way to stress the body. And when you can breathe and control your response in those stressful situations, you can do it in unstressful or in unhealthy stressful situations. And at the beginning of 2021, when we have found out, and this podcast episode will come soon, probably actually before you'll probably listen to it before this one, is when Linabelle was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I started to get very anxious, and I started to, like, all these anxiety and stories were creating in my head. And I was fortunate. I don't know if it was Jasil, but I was fortunate. Oh, it was Goop Lab. Which is
Yeah.
was something that Jasil put me onto. Um, I learned about a man named Wim Hof and cold immersion and how it helps your body obviously self-regulate. There's so many benefits, but like specifically dealing with stressful situations. And I was able to do a 30-day shower challenge where I started small, ice cold showers, and by the end of the showers, I was like 7-10 minutes, like I was just rocking it. And then I jumped into the ocean on the 31st day, and I did, in 34-degree water. I did 12 minutes, and I felt like a champ, right? And I'm not saying that to like get accolades. What I'm saying is, like, the benefits now that I look back, as I carried that into the beginning stages of RV life, was my ability to respond versus react in stressful situations. And like, that's, I woke up this morning, and the first thing, something I read on the Wim Hof, is the first thing, like, shower, cold shower. And I recognize that taking a cold shower first thing in the morning it has been the hardest thing. Like, I've been
So
up
I
until,
first heard about cold immersion when I started listening to Tony Robbins like 5 years ago. And he said that that is how he starts his day, that in his houses, his stationary, like homes, he has it's one of them. I saw it's like a little circle. He just like jumps in, and I forget what was the temperature, but it was ridiculous, like
58.
freezing temperature. Huh?
It was 58. I remember watching the video.
Oh, I don't, like I said, I don't remember the temperature, but him saying like that is how I start my morning, because he's like, if that is the hardest thing I have to do for the day, like, it's done. I can handle anything else that comes at me the rest of the day. And that was the first time I heard about cold immersion, but that did not inspire me to do.
Yeah. I mean,
I have done it a few times, but Alex has been much more dedicated for cold immersion than I have.
yeah. And like I said, today I always ran away from it immediately in the morning, and today I realized why. It's like your body temperatures from warm from in the bed, and
Yep.
then you go straight to cold, and I was chattering. I honestly didn't feel warm until about halfway through this podcast, and I started to heat up because passion came out. So I appreciate you warming me up. I warmed myself up, but um, I think that that's really where you can start. And if anybody's interested and is like, man, this is us, and really want to change the narrative, because we control our story. Like, we narrate our story, and our beliefs are really what control our actions. And so, what best way to better, like, to get deep down and understand what our childhood beliefs are, or conditioned beliefs, and understand what we want, or you want, right? And I'm speaking to the listener now, what you want in life. And when you were able
And
to,
what I say is, if I had to give someone a piece of advice that they can just walk away with, and something that they can practice on their own, they don't need a spouse or a partner or anyone, is just to start becoming aware of who you're around, the conversations you have, the content that you're consuming. So where are you scrolling? What are you looking at? Are you binging Netflix, Hulu, whatever? what are you watching? How do you feel when you watch those things? Like, do you feel uplifted? Do you feel more positive? Do you feel more energetic? Or are you just doing it to numb yourself, to numb your mind, and just to start tuning into that daily, like, and start thinking about it. Like, how do I feel when I do this? What am I thinking when I do this? Like, and just with everything you're doing, is just start tuning into that yourself. Because what happens with majority of the people is you cannot express yourself to your partner or to your spouse or to other people in your life because you don't even know what you're feeling. You have no idea what you're feeling. You have no idea what's going through your head. You are on complete autopilot the majority of the time. And you have no chance to just take a moment to unwind and really see what's going on inside of yourself. Not what your friend who came over and bickered for half an hour about something that happened in her life, and now that you feel like that's on you. What is really going on inside of you? And slowly you're going to start realizing that some things are not serving you. And that's what I've really done in my life, is to really raise my awareness of that, and then start creating boundaries, which, happens over time. But just start becoming aware of, who am I hanging around? How do I feel around those people? Are they raising my energy levels, or are they lowering my energy levels? Do I feel more positive when I have a conversation with this person, or do I feel more negative after having a conversation with this person? Programs that you're watching, everything. Like, I can say that I don't watch TV anymore. Like, we do not watch TV. I don't remember the last time we sat down to watch TV. And that was one of our favorite things to do. We even had like 6-7 shows that we would binge watch, early on in our marriage, on Netflix and this and that. And, for the past 5 years, the last 5 years, it's really diminished to the point of none. And we'll watch a movie here and there. But TV shows, like, we just don't do TV shows anymore. Like, it just doesn't happen. And we don't miss it.
Yeah, I don't miss it. My weakness is still Tennessee Volunteer football on Saturdays.
Yeah, football. Football will never leave his brain, I think. But and then what we did start watching was shows like Gwyneth Paltrow Sex and Goop Lab and things like that, and different things that are actually adding value and expansion to our life, versus we're just watching this, like, to pass time kind of TV. Because we don't enjoy that anymore. So if you want to start having these conversations and moving your life towards a place where you can have these conversations, it's doing the work on yourself first. So like he said, journaling, meditation, exercising, maybe cold immersion, and awareness. Start becoming aware of what's actually going on with you, because I cannot articulate what's going on with me if I am not aware of what's going on with me. And that is where the blaming comes in, because you are putting that responsibility on that person, because you can't say, oh, I'm the one feeling this. This is happening because of this, this, and this. That's why I'm feeling this. Instead, you're like, you're the one who blah, 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 and it's your fault. And then, argument starts from there. So I think those are things that anyone can do. You don't need money or anything. Like, all you need is to, spend time with yourself, start becoming aware, start putting pen to paper, start journaling, meditating. You can meditate for 5 minutes, start finding resources that will help you through this. So like, if you drive to work every day, there's podcasts, there's Audible books, like, there's all these things. Like, start consuming the content from the people that you want to be like. So if you're like, if you see someone and you're like, man, what they're doing is amazing, like, I wish my life was more like that, consume their content, see what comes from it. Because that's what I've done. Like, I went away from consuming garbage content, and I started dialing into, this is how I want my life to be, this is where I want to go, and dialing into those people's content. And that's what has allowed us to get to where we are today. It hasn't been because we figured this out all on our own. So find those people that you feel inspired by, that you feel positive from listening to them and consuming their content, and follow them. Like, I don't follow anyone on Facebook because of that. And I've followed many people on Instagram because of that. And I just follow the content that really speaks to me, that's going to take me to the next level. And that is my focus in this moment, of life.
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing on exercise. Big misconception that exercise must happen in a gym or lift weights or whatever the case may be. And I think that we were able to, for ourselves, shift that and exercise looking in the forms of nature walks, bike rides, like being outdoors, and I think that that is something that has more, benefit or than anything that we're talking about
Buddy Jim.
in a sweaty gym. Like I went on a nature walk yesterday, and I was so immersed in the nature, like I wanted to track to see how far I was going, and got so immersed in what I was doing and being grounded with nature that I forgot to press go. And so, anyways, where I'm going with this is like we are one, right? And I'm not just talking about people. I'm talking about the earth. I'm talking about trees. I'm talking about every energetic being, everything. Everything has consciousness, like that's something I learned recently. But where I'm going with this is like being able to go in nature, close your eyes, just pause your breath and listen to what's around really will be able to help you get in alignment with yourself.
Yeah, for people who've never done this, like just put a minute timer, 2 minutes. Like it doesn't have to be 30 minutes of you doing this. It can literally be 5 minutes of just sitting in silence somewhere in nature or at home. Like start small. If it feels like 20 minutes is too much, don't do 20 minutes, do 5 minutes, do that until it feels good. And then you can say, you know what, I'm going to commit to 5 minutes for 2 weeks, for a month. Then I'm going to up it to 10 minutes and see what happens, see what changes come through. But that was all for today.
We're gonna call it the Jasil, Alex, and Lumi podcast because Lumi keeps showing up in life.
Yeah, she keeps coming every morning. She
Great.
can't. She doesn't find me in bed. She comes searching for me. But the other three are still asleep.
Yeah. Cue the music.